And I see Luiz is there. Perfect. Okay. I think we can start now. Welcome to the audience on YouTube as well. Our today's InfraTalk has the title Fair Digital Objects for NFDI for Data Science and Beyond. We have the full power of 4 well-known speakers. Peter Mutschke from GESE's Leibniz Institute for Social Sciences, Professor Luiz Olavo Bonino da Silva Santos from the University of Twente in the Netherlands, Abu Ibn Bayazid from Fraunhofer Fit Institute for Applied Informatics, Professor Oya Beyan from the University of Cologne and the Fraunhofer Fit Institute for Applied Informatics as well. And it was also planned that Peter Wittenburg, the co-chair of the International FDO Forum, takes place. However, he's facing some unsolvable technical issues, and therefore he is apologized for not taking part in today's session. Today's InfraTalk is about fair digital objects, which bring together all the important information about one entity in one place. First, in today's talk, the speakers will give an introduction to the scope and the relevance of FDOs in the NFDI landscape and talk about the NFDI framework. Then they will present a test case for applying a fast-track approach for FDOs in the health domain. Last but not least, the road ahead will be discussed. This includes tools to support deployment of FDOs and fostering the synergies with NFDI projects for broadening the base of FDO deployment. There's time for questions after the talk. And now I hand over to Peter Mutschke.
Hello and very welcome also from my side. As Peter Wittenburg unfortunately cannot attend to a poor internet connection in Ireland, I will start with a slide I was going to show rather at the end of the presentation cycle, a slide on our working group on semantics and fair digital objects, FDOs, in the framework of the FDO Forum. fairdo.org, which is an international community of researchers working on fair digital objects, FDOs. I'm Peter Mutschke from GESE's Cologne Leibniz Institute for the Social Sciences. I'm co-chairing the group together with Jan Lefranc, and I'm also involved in 3 NFDI consortia, Consort SVD, NFDI4DataScience, and BIRD at NFDI. So let me introduce the group briefly. The motivation behind it is rather evident. It's all about breaking down data silos to better enable cross-domain research, which becomes more and more important to address global challenges such as climate change, environmental justice, things like that, where you need to combine data from different communities or data communities. FDOs are seen as key enablers for data integration and semantic interoperability in terms of the FAIR principles. Therefore, the FDO concept also plays a central role within the emerging Internet of fair data and services, where the entire data exchange is based on FDOs as a minimal protocol. Likewise, the IP protocol used for the Internet. However, there are a number of open issues and challenges which we are focusing on the group. We need to agree on a technical specification on FDOs, on protocols maintaining FDOs. We need to agree on a semantic model for FDOs. We need to agree on the minimal set of mandatory metadata. And the FDO framework proposed by Luiz Bonino, presented a little bit later, right after my talk, provides a clear semantic model for FDOs based on a set of unambiguous semantic predicates, which make semantic descriptions of FDOs machine actionable. in a predictable way. And it's also a unique opportunity from our perspective that FDOs are not restricted to just PIDs, but also to include semantic web approaches. But please note that the FDO framework, the FDOF, is seen just as an implementation choice for FDO. It's not meant as a standard, and it's always up to the data community to decide to use FDO for data representation or any other approach. An ongoing work currently is to develop a web interface helping data stewards to model data in FDOF, which finally then generates some RDF. This is still an ongoing work. And in the following, Luiz Bonino will present the concept of fair digital objects and the FDOF framework at all more deeply. And after that, as mentioned in the beginning of the session, we will have a presentation on a use case, which is also a use case in the framework of NFDI4DataScience, which applies FDOF to that use case, which will be presented by Oya Beyan and Bayazid. And with that, I would like to hand over to Luiz to present his FDOF framework. I stop my screen sharing now.
Luiz, you are muted.
Okay. Can you confirm that you can see the whole screen?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So good afternoon. I'm Luiz. I work for the University of Twente, as it was said, but also for the Leiden University Medical Center in the biosemantics group. So because I was assuming that Peter Wittenberg was going to present, to give an introduction of fair digital objects in general, I focused my presentation on the framework. But then, since he's not able to present, maybe just a few minutes to give an introduction of what fair digital objects are and how they came about. So the idea of these digital objects in a specific way, it started in 95 from Bob Kahn. So more or less at the same time when the internet became commercial and widespread, he, as one of the creators, together with Vint Cerf of the TCP/IP, he felt that the interactions between machines using this protocol could use some extra information. So as we're going to see later, for instance, on the internet, the TCP/IP is only concerned about, I have an address of something, and I'm sending these messages back and forth. And then the protocol is responsible for rerouting this across different networks. And but then when you get the identifier or the address of some kind of resource, you have no idea what these things are, what they represent, and how what can be done with them, and so forth. So the idea of digital objects is to provide a little bit more information so that we can reach higher levels of not only interoperability, but also automation. So then fast forwarding from 95 until 5-6 years ago, after the emergence of the FAIR principles, the publication of the paper in 2016, then in the second high-level expert group of the European Commission to discuss the European Open Science Cloud, the first one was to come up with the initial ideas of what the EOS could look like and what was going to be. And then on the second high-level expert group, they in the report they introduced this idea of fair digital objects. It was an extension of the idea of digital objects from Bob Kahn that there was already increasingly large community behind and working on applications, on infrastructure, on resolvers, and so forth. And then the idea in that report was how can we get the FAIR principles to use these principles as extra requirements so we can enhance even further this idea of digital objects so they can comply with the FAIR principles. So that was a very, very quick and a quick overlook of the history of digital objects first and fair digital objects. And now the idea is to introduce the framework, as Peter Mutschke said. The idea is to the principles and these general approaches are nice to expose behaviors, the expected behaviors. But then when you need to realize, we need to take some decisions, some technical decisions, what technology or platform to choose and so forth. And that's the idea of the framework. So here, we, of course, something that's called Fair Digital Object Framework would not happen without following the FAIR principles. Here, we are not going to discuss the principles. I'm assuming that you're all well familiar with them. So the idea here is just to highlight that everything that we are going to see after that is based on this 10, 15 principles, if you count the sub-principles. The idea, the whole motivation for this is one particular part of the the paper, when we said that the FAIR principles focused on machine actionability. So the idea here is that we have a global data and services ecosystem, and then we have these autonomous artificial agents that go around, navigate through this ecosystem, and encounter things, resources, services, data, other types of digital objects that have different types, formats, and access mechanisms, protocols, and so forth. And then they should, as autonomously as possible, to act on our behalf appropriately. But then we have a lot of challenges of how can they do that, because they need information about the things in order to act, in order to check if those things that they are encountering are the things that they are needed, or in order to fulfill some of the goals that we set for them. So just to contextualize as well, we have on the web today, more or less, like I said before, this network of information that's basically focus on humans, right? We have a lot of resources, and then a machine finds an identifier of one of these resources. The machine doesn't know what this resource is. It can know, in some cases, what's the file format of that resource, but in many cases that's not enough. For instance, if this is an HTML page, the identifier refers to an HTML page. It's a page about what? What's that? The nature of that thing is an article. Maybe it's just a page that contains an image and so forth. So the same for PDF, the same for other file formats. And then these resources are linked without any explicit meaning. When we are connecting them and we are, as humans, are navigating, we can infer that if we click here in the title of a news, in a newspaper website, we infer or we assume that if we click on the title of the article, the next page, the next resource that's going to be open, is a page with the full content of the article. But that's an assumption based on the contextualization that we have as human by our experience and looking at the page and the context around that. For machines, that's very hard for them to identify and therefore to navigate meaningfully in this network of resources. For supporting an automated client exploration of this data services ecosystem, our computational agents should be able to answer some questions. Here we listed 4 fundamental questions that we consider relevant. That what is this that I'm dealing with? I have an identifier in my hands, but that, this identifier identifies what? I have no idea what this refers to. And how can I get, if I don't know what it refers to, how can I get more information about that thing? And what are the actions or the operations that I can do with that? What can be done with that object that's been identified by the identifier that I have? And not only what's possible to be done with that, what am I allowed to do with that? Do I have permission to do this and that with this object? I have to be able to figure this out in order to follow, whatever accessibility conditions and rules and so forth. So then for trying to answer this question, or to define a framework that includes infrastructural components that could help us answer, provide information so that these questions can be answered, we have the Fair Digital Object Framework that has some main characteristics. It's based on the digital object architecture coming from Bob Kahn in '95, and mixing that, extending that. So it was inspired by the digital object architecture, enhanced with the requirements of the FAIR principles and the technologies available nowadays, like linked data, semantic web, that didn't exist at that time. Here we have a clear separation between object, identifier, and metadata, especially between object and metadata, because they are completely different entities, and they should have their own life cycles and so forth. And one, the role of metadata by the FAIR principles, F2, for instance, is to describe the data or the whatever type of digital object. So we have this relation between metadata and data, but these are different things. We'd like to have a predictable identifier resolution behavior that we can aim together with the mechanism to access metadata from the object identifiers. The idea is that if you have an identifier, depending on how we're asking to resolve the identifier, we should be sure that in one way we get the actual object, in another way that we can ask, we get the metadata, or at least the reference to the metadata records of that identifier if I want to have more information about that. And for this separation between the object and its metadata, we have to have defined the relations between them. So if I look at the object, I know that this object has this metadata as metadata records. If I look at the metadata, I can be sure that that metadata is a set of descriptions about that specific object. So we need to define these relations among them so that people can start reusing these relations and automate the process. And also we have a common machine actionable metadata presentation format so that we can have client applications that are able, in a broad scope, to read, at least to read and interpret the metadata records that are found. Nowadays, we have an enormous variety of metadata formats, and then it's very difficult to get applications that can understand each one of them. And then if we discover an object and try to look at the metadata and it's presented in a format that my machine is not able to parse, then the application is not going to have access to this kind of information. And we have to answer the question, what is this that I'm talking about? We have a typing system. And we are going to see that the typing system is not just a single type, but it's applicable in more than one level. So in a digital object, according to the framework, is a bit sequence, but not a random bit sequence, a bit sequence, a sequence of bits that represents something that has an informational value. And that something is presented according to the FAIR principle. So it has a unique identifier, it has metadata, and so forth. So here I'm trying to build up the framework from a very simple model very abstract. So we have digital objects, we have identifiers that identify these digital objects, we have this typing system that helps us characterize these digital objects using different perspectives, and we have the metadata records that can describe these digital objects. And here we have already a clear separation between object identifier metadata, one of the characteristics of the framework. The typing system is used, as I said, to answer the question, what is this that I'm dealing with? What kind of thing is that? Is this a service? Is this an ontology? Is this a data set, genetics data, and so forth, a personal medical health record, or whatever type of object. And then this typing system, depending on the type of these things that we are dealing with, we have some types of operations that are supported for that specific type. Things that you can do, for instance, with an ontology are different than you can do with an image, which is different that the things that you can do with an audio file or a video or some other types of data and objects and so forth. So depending on the operations are related to the types of the objects and the infrastructure that's supporting these types of operations for that object. And then we can, by look at the type and what operations are available for that type, we can know what can be done with that. And then look at the metadata records that has things like license or rights and access conditions. We can get information about what it's allowed to do with that object. Not only what's possible, but also what you as a object user can or consumer can do with that in a given situation. And then here we have these relations between the object and the metadata that are defined. So digital object has metadata records, and the metadata record are the metadata of a digital object. And then from the identifier, we can get, we can interact directly with, we can resolve the identifier directly to the object, but the infrastructure also allows us to resolve the identifier to the identifier record, which is a simplified, another type of metadata record that contains just a few information, basic information, like what's the type of that thing, what are the metadata records that are available for that thing. So then it's a kind of summary card. Instead of going through all the metadata records, potential several metadata records about that object, you get one simplified thing that says, okay, this thing that we are dealing with is of that type, and here is the list of metadata records that can explain further this object. So the framework, as a framework, comprises a set of implementation choices for the features that we are intending for that, like the identifier resolution behavior, metadata presentation, access mechanism, disqualify the relations between them. And it's based on the hourglass principles, like the internet, like the web, and so forth, in the sense of setting just a minimum set of requirements, so the thin waist of the hourglass, that we can allow maximum freedom of implementation for both sides of the hourglass. So the things flow from one side of the hourglass through this thin waist, so that is represented this minimal set of requirements. So this is just to illustrate that these figures that we are navigating and building up here, they are more properly defined in a conceptual model. I'm not going to discuss this here, but just for you to have a notion that this is the work that we have been doing in the last year to try to conceptualize all of this, the relations among them in the last almost 10 months, I guess. The FDO semantics group, we have been working in trying to apply this conceptual model in concrete examples, and this is what Iman is going to show you next. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Luiz. Now I will share my screen. Just give me a second. Yes, I hope you can see my screen. Okay, warm welcome from beautiful city of Cologne. Before I'm starting our presentation, I will give you some background information about myself and why we are building this use case. I am affiliated with the medical faculty, and my role is here to improve the reusability of healthcare data to support data science. I lead an institute and also a medical data integration center. As a researcher coming from the semantic web field, when I heard about fair digital objects, I thought maybe it might help to solve some of our problems. And we start to investigate a use case. And today I will share this use case with you. Okay, we are part of this NFDI for data science project. And as you all know, data science is a new discipline, mostly driven by computer scientists, but not only computer scientists. If you look to domains such as medical domain I am working on, we have many other partners in this data science workflow. So you have the doctors, you have nurses, you have stem cell researchers, you have data protection officers, ethic boards representatives, and you have very wide range of those different roles. And out of these complex processes, at the end, we have an algorithm decide on what we can do and what we cannot do. If you think about like how this AI and machine learning shapes our lives, you can think about, okay, it suggests which books to read, which restaurants to go, but also it decides on your Schufa scores, like who can get what credit. Or more seriously, if you are a patient and if you want to be part of or take a new treatment or enroll in a new clinical trial, it can decide if you can benefit from this new treatment or not. So in reality, when you look to AI and machine learning, it might become a problem of life or death. So in that setting, what is very important for us? We have lots of challenges. When you are having an AI, is it really transparent how this AI algorithm is built? Can we really reproduce the algorithm with another data set? Maybe this data it's developed in a data coming from a hospital from United States, and in German everything's so different, all these data features. Or is it really fair, algorithmic fairness? It might be working most of the population, but it might not be working for women or some minorities. So it's very important to tackle all these challenges. So in the NFDI for data science, what is our goal? To make all these resources involved in this data science process fair, include not only the data, but code, models, publication. You can think of anything in this process. But what does it really mean in practice? How are we gonna make it? So first, take a very brief look to difficult life of a data scientist. As I said, like data science is a teamwork. It's not only one person, and it's not only one digital object or digital artifact. You have multiple roles and multiple people producing data, code, results, to some softwares and some publications. And even they are following the best practices, all these different digital objects might live in their own environment. For example, your data might be in the certified data repository. Someone might develop a code and it might be in GitHub, or like you can publish your results in Zenado and you can containerize your software, so on and so forth. But they are all disconnected. But data science lifecycle is a one process. So given that there is no single system and each digital object should live in this own their environment, we want to increase the fairness of all this data science process without increasing the burden of this involved researchers, data scientists. So one approach we thought it might be smart to use fair digital objects. If we can encapsulate each digital object in this process as a fair digital objects, and if we can register them in this registries, and if we can create links between them, then we can have all this fairness throughout this data science process. So we said, okay, let's try with a use case. We just picked one use case, which is we are familiar with. It is a distributed analysis use case. So what we have in here, there's a publication, and what this study does, there are different data centers. One is Aachen, one is Cologne, and one is Leipzig in reality, and there is skin lesion data. And we run analysis results, like we train our algorithms in these different data settings. So it's a type of incremental learning. So just to make this process a little bit simplified and see how we can apply these digital objects, what is happening? Like someone develops the code and pushes to Git repositories. Then you create containers out of this code. Then you send your container to the first data source, you run there, and you train your machine learning algorithm. Then this machine learning algorithm ships to second data source. Again, it's executed there. Then you complete after certain cycles this training. Then you analyze the outcome. You have the algorithm and you write the publication. So you have this all complex relations and different types of repositories and digital objects. Now question is how fair digital objects can help us to make it more reproducible, transparent, and apply all these fair principles. Imon will show you how we implemented fair digital objects now.
Yeah, so as I mentioned that, so we have code repositories, we have executable container, like for example, Docker container. So for code repositories, we have GitHub repositories, and for executable container, we have Docker repositories where we can maintain our container in Docker registry. And then we have on one side we have data station, like for example, as in previous slide, we see that we have one data station in Cologne, one station in Aachen. So the data resides in this station, and we have also publication results. Yeah, and so can you go to next slide, please? Yeah, so this is the pictorial view or what just were explained previously. In the first hand, the code repositories, we all the codes resides for example, the machine learning course, and then the code goes to like for one station, for example, in Aachen station, and the code first uses the Docker executable container, and it runs in the in station 1, and it uses the data source of the station 1 because in the data source 1 belongs to the station 1, and it executes the code and it produces the result based on the data source 1. And the data source 1 has their results, and they can publish the results. And then the executable container moves to the station 2, and the station 2 has data source 2, and the station 2 use the executable container and executes the source code, and then they have their individual results, and then they can publish their results. And so the executable container moves from station to station, and yeah. And can you go to the next slide, please? Yeah, so this is the use cases we have explained so far. This is will redeploy it in our system. So in the first, you can see the Git repositories where all the machine learning code resides, and then the second slide you can see the Harvard repository where we maintain all our container to move from one station to another station. Yeah, so this is the FAIR digital object framework Luiz mentioned in his talk. Like we are trying to map this model to our use cases. So yeah, can you go to the next slide? Yeah, so so now we the scenario we explained, we will as this is a short limited time, so we will focus on very very small portion, so that we can understand properly how we can map. So this is the entity relationship of scenario of our use case, and now we'll map this from our conceptual model, FDU conceptual model. Yeah, can you go to the next slide, please? Yeah. So this is the mapping of our entities with the FDU model, and if we go to the next, please. Yeah, now focus on the first executable container. So this executable container, if we want to map this in our FDU model, so this is an FAIR information object. So we map this into our model as a FAIR information object, and it has it has this executable container has metadata. And can you go to the next slide, please? Yeah, so it has metadata, and this this executable container metadata is mapped with as a FAIR metadata record, because it contains the metadata, and it is it has if you can see it has is metadata of relation, and the previous executable container has metadata. So both these entities are tightly related. And yeah, can you go to the next slide, please? Yeah, and then each executable container has it is actually an Docker image. So the executable container is materialized is as a Docker image. So we map this executable container image from with our FD model as defined is as a FAIR materialization object. So this is mapped with the FD model. And the relation is materialized by, because executable container at the end actually and Docker image. So yeah. So can you go to the next one? So, and the executable container actually what it is the characterization of an source code, like ML source code. It at the end, the ML source code at the end, it maintain a executable container to run the code. So for the FDU model, we characterize is as a source code. So can you go to the next slide, please? Yeah. So the source code actually, if we want to map this with our FDU model, is an FAIR information object. So, and this source code is associated with the executable container. And on the other hand, executable container is characterized by the source code. So yeah, the source code actually contains the machine learning source code. Can you go to the next slide? So now this is the entity modeling entity mapping of from the FDU model to our like use cases entities. Now we will like convert this into RDF modeling. So now we will focus on only the selected box to understand this better in this presentation. So can you go to the next slide, please? Yeah, so now like we'll try to model this portion like only executable container, executable container metadata, and the executable container image, which is the Docker image, into RDF modeling. How can we model this in like based on the model we like Luiz presented? So can you go to the next slide? Yeah. So now focus on the executable container. So this executable container is an fair information object we define as a F2F or fair information object. So, and it has metadata. It has some general purpose metadata like creator, license, and others. And now we focus on the like. Can you go to the next slide? Yeah. So now we'll focus on this has metadata. Like this it has a relation has metadata because the executable container has metadata. So like, and it has the entity executable container metadata, which you can see in the third line we defined. An executable container metadata is an fair metadata record we defined as fair metadata record, and it has some other it can contain some other metadata, and obviously it has on the other hand it has also a is metadata of the executable container. So can you go to the next slide? Yeah, and the this executable container is materialized by a Docker image. So we define is materialized by, and we give the Docker image like link, and then we define in the line 15 we define the Docker image can you go to the next slide? Yeah, so it is a materialization object, and it materializes the executable container because the executable container at the end is materialized by Docker image. So Docker image can contain many other general purpose metadata. For example, it can because the Docker image can have many other like license, creator, encoding format, and we also can use custom metadata record, like which project it belongs to, level, and issue modified, and version. So in this way we can like model our use case into like F2F conceptual model, and we can materialize into this RDF modeling. So I hope this will give some understanding like how can a use case can be developed, can be mapped with F2F modeling. Yeah. So I think.
Thank you, Iman. Yes, like in this exercise, as we mentioned, we really enjoyed applying fair digital objects to solve our problem of representing each digital objects with enough information and as a persistent digital objects. And now I will give floor to Peter for the last remarks.
Yes, thank you, Oya and Iman, for that presentation. And as presented by Oya and Iman, we have now fully implemented the FDO framework presented by Luiz to a real-world use case emanating from a recent NFDI consortium, NFDI4DataScience. And as a next natural step, please, next slide, please, Oya. As the big next step, we intend to broaden the base of use cases. And for this the best is to become a member of the group, the FDO SAM group from the FDO forum I have presented in the beginning, to discuss practical challenges of applying the FDOF framework to use cases that you bring from your NFDI consortium. And the other item I would like to draw your attention to is attend the International Conference on Fair Digital Objects in Leiden in October this year to build synergies and bridges to the FDO community. And with that, I would like to thank you for your attention, and I think we are happy to take questions.
Thank you very much to all of you for really going step by step to this to the topic of fair digital objects. You mentioned that this topic started in the mid of the 1990s. However, there is still a lot of room to develop further and to integrate this topic further into research. I think now we can stop streaming.